They told me the most dangerous alpha in the world had never once closed his eyes in front of another living soul. Not in 40 years. Not through 3 wars. Not through the betrayal that took half his pack. Not through the kind of grief that hollows out ordinary men and leaves them standing in doorways at 3 in the morning, staring at nothing. He slept the way a knife sleeps, folded, but never truly still. So I need you to understand what it meant, what it really, genuinely meant, when that man finally let his head drop onto my shoulder in the middle of the worst storm these mountains had seen in a generation. I am a nobody, a night shift medic on a road no one drives anymore, and yet the deadliest creature alive chose my shoulder to break on. This is the story of that night and the choice it left me holding. Stay with me. I promise you have never heard one like it. I keep a logbook. I always have. My mother used to say it was a nervous habit dressed up as a profession, and she wasn't entirely wrong. When my hands have nothing to do, they reach for a pen, the way some people reach for a cigarette or a thumbnail to chew. So when the pounding started on the door of Larkspur Station that night, 3 slow strikes, then a long silence, then one more, like whoever was out there had run out of strength halfway through deciding to live. The first thing I did, before I even stood up, was write down the time. 11:47 p.m. knocking, storm at full force, no vehicle headlights on the pass. That last detail is what made my stomach turn over. Nobody walks the Larkspur Pass in February. Nobody walks it in a blizzard that had already buried the lower switchbacks under 4 feet of snow and was working hard on the rest. The nearest town was 11 miles down a road the plows had given up on at dusk. Whoever was knocking had come up the mountain on foot, in the dark, into the teeth of a storm that could strip the warmth out of a body in under an hour. I set the pen down. I remember that. I remember the small click of it against the desk because for one absurd second it was the loudest thing in the room, louder than the wind, louder than my own pulse. Larkspur Station isn't a hospital. I want to be honest about that from the start because people hear medic and clinic, and they imagine something with hallways and machines that beep. It was a converted ranger outpost, 2 rooms, a generator, a wood stove, a cabinet of supplies that I inventoried every Sunday because counting things calms me down. It existed because of the truce. After the wars between the packs and the human settlements wound down into that exhausted, brittle thing we called peace, somebody on some committee decided there should be neutral ground in the high country. A place where a wounded shifter and a wounded human could both be patched up without either side being able to claim it as an act of war. I was the entire night staff. Me, and a radio that worked when it felt like it, and a logbook full of slow nights. I opened the door. The wind came in first, the way it always does, throwing snow across the floorboards in a hissing sheet. And then I saw him, and every careful, sensible thought I owned went quiet at once. He was enormous. Not in the cartoon way the stories tell it, not 7 feet of rippling menace. He was tall, yes, but it was something else, something in the gravity of him, the way the storm itself seemed to bend around his shoulders instead of touching them. He stood with one forearm braced against the doorframe, and even slumped, even shaking, even with blood frozen black down the entire left side of his coat. He held himself like a man who had spent his whole life being the most dangerous thing in any room he entered, and had simply stopped noticing. His eyes found mine, pale, the gray of weathered slate, and entirely without fear, which frightened me more than rage would have. "You're the medic," he said. It wasn't a question. His voice was low and frayed at the edges, a rope worn down to its last few threads. "I'm the medic," I said. My own voice came out smaller than I wanted. He looked at me for a long moment, and I had the strangest sense that he was deciding something, not whether to trust me, but whether trusting me was worth the cost of needing to. Then his knees buckled, and 40 years of legend collapsed across my threshold like a felled tree. I have replayed the next few seconds more times than I can count. I should have been terrified. Some part of me was terrified, the old animal part that knows a predator on sight. But the louder part, the part that had spent 6 years learning to keep people from dying on tables, simply took over. I got my arms under his and I hauled. He was deadweight, impossibly heavy, and I dragged him across the floor toward the cot in the second room, leaving a long smeared trail of melting snow and blood that I would be scrubbing for days. It was only when I had him flat, only when I peeled back the frozen coat and saw the wound, that I understood who he was. Silver. The wound was packed with silver, deliberately, cruelly, not a single shot, but a wound that had been salted, the way you'd salt a field you never wanted to grow again. The flesh around it had gone the color of a bruise 3 days old, black and green and a yellow that doesn't belong on living tissue. Shifters heal. It's the first thing everyone knows about them, the thing the wars were fought over, the thing that made them terrifying. They knit back together from things that would kill a human 10 times. But silver is the lie at the center of all that strength. Silver they do not heal from. Silver, left in long enough, kills them slow. And there was only one shifter in the world that someone would hate enough, fear enough, to not just wound but to unmake. Only one whose enemies would want him to feel every hour of his dying. Lucan Vane, the alpha of the Morn packs, the man the stories called the most dangerous alpha in the world, and meant it and were right. I sat back on my heels. The wind threw itself against the window. Somewhere in the dark down the pass, I thought, there were people who had done this to him, who had driven silver into him, and then, by the look of the snow caked up to his thighs, chased him into a storm to finish the job. People who were very likely still coming. I want to tell you I made the brave choice quickly. I didn't. I sat there for what felt like a full minute, and what went through my mind was not duty or compassion or any of the noble things. What went through my mind was the truce, and the careful small life I had built on top of it, and the very simple arithmetic that if I saved this man, and the wrong people learned of it, Larkspur Station would not exist by spring, and neither, possibly, would I thought about the radio. I thought about how easy it would be to call it in, to make him someone else's impossible decision, to keep my hands clean. Then he made a sound, not a word, a small, involuntary sound, the kind a person makes when they've stopped being able to hide what they feel, and I realized with a jolt that the most dangerous alpha in the world was, at that moment, just a body in terrible pain, alone, 11 miles from anyone, having walked through a blizzard to knock politely on a stranger's door rather than die in the snow. I reached for my instruments. The thing about removing silver is that there is no kind way to do it. It has to come out, all of it, every grain, or the rest is pointless. I had lidocaine, but I had no idea if it would even touch him. Shifter physiology eats anesthetics the way the rest of us burn through coffee. So I told him the truth, which is the only thing I've ever known how to offer people on a bad night. I have to dig this out, I said. All of it. I don't know how much the numbing will help. It's going to be the worst hour of your week. His eyes opened, that slate gray, fearless, and now glassy with fever. I've had worse hours, he said. I believe you. Don't stop, he said. Whatever I do, whatever I say, you don't stop until it's all out. Understand? I understood. I understood that he was warning me, the way you warn someone before you hand them something that might go off. There is a reason the stories about him are the way they are. A wounded predator is the most dangerous predator there is, and I was about to spend an hour causing one the deepest pain of his recent life, with my unprotected hands inside the wound. He was telling me he might not be able to control what came next. He was telling me to be ready. I won't stop, I said. And then, because my hands needed something and my mouth has always been a coward, I added, I'm going to talk the whole time. I do that. You don't have to listen. The faintest thing crossed his face. Not a smile. He didn't have the strength for a smile. But the place where a smile would have been. Talk, he said. So I talked. I talked while I cut, while I irrigated, while I went in with the forceps and pulled out the first jagged sliver and dropped it ringing into the steel tray. I talked about the inventory I'd done that Sunday, the exact count of gauze rolls, the way the generator hiccuped when the temperature dropped below zero, the lark-shaped enamel pin on my collar that my sister had given me before she moved away, and that I touched, apparently, 400 times a day. I was reciting all of it, this stream of small, useless human nothing, because it was the only thing I had to put between him and the agony. And he held still. I cannot tell you what that cost him. The first piece of silver, he made the sound again, smaller. The second, his whole body went rigid, every muscle pulled to its limit, and a low sound came out of him that wasn't human and wasn't quite wolf either, something from the seam between the two. The cot frame groaned. His hands found the metal rails, and I watched the metal bend under his grip, slow, like wax, and I kept talking, gauze rolls, generator, the lark pin, don't stop, never stop. By the fifth piece, sweat was running off him in sheets despite the cold, and his eyes had rolled half back, and still, he did not move toward me. He turned all of it inward. He spent that monstrous strength on the single task of not becoming the thing his enemies had tried to make him, and he did it for a stranger, on the word of a stranger, and somewhere around the eighth piece of silver, I stopped being afraid of him and started being something much more complicated. It took 2 hours, not 1. I lied about the hour. I always round down for patience. When the last grain came free, a fleck no bigger than a grain of rice, that had been doing more damage than anything its size has a right to, I held it up to the lamp so he could see it, and his eyes tracked it, and he let out a breath that seemed to come from somewhere underneath the floor. "That's all of it," I said. "That's everything. You're going to be all right. You hear me? You're going to be all right." He didn't answer. He was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on anyone, much less on a man who was supposed to be a legend, a kind of disbelieving exhaustion, as if I had done something not just kind but foreign, something he had no category for. "Why?" he said. It wasn't a full question. I knew what he was asking anyway. "Why did you do this? Why didn't you call it in? Why would you take the risk?" I thought about lying. I thought about saying something noble about the truce, about the oath I'd taken, about neutral ground. Instead, I told him the small true thing, which is the only currency I have ever trusted. "Because you knocked," I said. "You could have broken the door down. You're strong enough. You knocked, and then you knocked again because the first time wasn't enough and you were trying to be polite about dying on my porch. Anybody who does that in a storm like this, I'm not going to let them die in the snow." He stared at me. The wind screamed against the glass. And then the radio crackled. It was down to static most of the time, but the static had a shape now, a voice trying to push through it, and even broken into pieces I caught the words that mattered. "Larkspur Station, come in. We have reason to believe static, a hostile asset moving through the high country, static, armed teams sweeping the pass. Hold position. Report any contact." I looked at the radio. I looked at him. His eyes had gone hard again, the glassiness burning off, the legend climbing back into the wreck of the body. "Coil," he said quietly, like a curse, like a name he'd carried a long time. "They'll have followed the blood. The storm bought me hours, not days." He tried to sit up, failed, his arms shaking. "I have to go. I can't be here when they come. I won't bring that down on you. Not after," he gestured weakly at the tray of bloody silver at me, at the whole impossible night. "Not after this." He got one leg off the cot. He couldn't stand. His body, which had carried him 11 miles through a blizzard on the last of its strength, had finally spent everything it had. He sat on the edge of my cot, the most dangerous alpha in the world, and for one moment all the menace and all the legend fell away, and what was left was just a man at the absolute bottom of himself, trying and failing to do the one decent thing he had left, to leave, so that the danger he carried would leave with him. And I made my second choice of the night, the harder one, the one I still turn over at 3 in the morning when I can't sleep. I went to the radio. I keyed it. Through the static I said in the steadiest voice I owned, "Larkspur Station, copy. No contact. Heavy snow, 0 visibility. Nobody up here but me and the wind." I lied to the truce I had sworn to keep. I lied to the only thing protecting me. I looked the man in the eye while I did it, so he would know it was a choice and not a panic, and I set the radio down. "You can't walk," I said. "You'd die in the first mile, and then they'd have your body, and whoever you're protecting would have nothing. So you're going to stay. And when they come, I'm going to be a tired night medic who hasn't seen anyone, and you're going to be very, very quiet." He looked at me for a long time. The wind, the stove ticking, the smell of blood and antiseptic and wet wool. "You don't know what you've just done," he said softly. "No," I admitted. "I touched the lark pin on my collar without meaning to. But I know what I'd have done if I hadn't, and I couldn't have lived in that." Outside, far down the pass, almost lost in the storm, I heard the first faint growl of an engine clawing its way up the mountain. He heard it too. Of course he did. He'd have heard it minutes before me. His jaw tightened. He looked at the door, and then he looked at me, and I watched something settle in him, a decision, or maybe just the end of resisting one. "Wren," he said. He'd read my name off the badge clipped beside the lark pin. It was the first time anyone that night had used it, and the sound of it in that low, frayed voice did something to me I am not going to try to describe. "If this goes wrong, if they get through that door, you tell them I forced you. You hear me? You tell them I held you at." "I'm not going to tell them anything," I said, "because nothing is going to go wrong. Now lie back down before you fall down." He lay back down. The engine far below ground on through the dark, getting closer one slow yard at a time. I picked up my pen. My hands, I noticed, were perfectly steady now, which made no sense at all. I looked at the page where 2 hours and a whole lifetime ago I had written 11:47 p.m. knocking. No headlights. Underneath it, I wrote nothing. For the first time in my life, I closed the logbook on an empty line. Some things you don't write down, some things you carry instead. The truck reached the station at 1:20 in the morning. I know the time because I made myself look at the clock instead of the door, the way you stare at a fixed point to keep from being sick. There were 3 of them. I watched the headlights swing across the front window, slow and deliberate, the way men move when they want you to know they're in no hurry because they believe they already own the outcome. I had spent the last 40 minutes making Larkspur Station tell a lie. I'd moved Lucan into the supply room behind the false back of the medicine cabinet, a space the original Rangers had built for who knows what, that I'd always assumed was for valuables and had never once used. I'd scrubbed the floor twice. I'd burned the bloody gauze in the stove and aired the worst of the smell out into the storm. I'd changed into a fresh shirt because the old one had his blood on the cuff, and I'd done my own count of supplies and written it in the logbook in my normal hand, so the most recent entry would look like an ordinary, boring night. Then I'd put the kettle on, because nothing in the world looks more innocent than a woman making tea. The knock this time was not polite. It was a fist, and it was meant to be heard. I opened the door with a mug already in my hand and let the irritation of a tired person show on my face, because the truest disguise is a real emotion pointed in a slightly wrong direction. "It's nearly 1:30, I said. "Whatever it is, somebody had better be bleeding." The man in front was big, human, with the flat, unbothered eyes of someone who'd done a great deal of unpleasant work and slept fine afterward. Behind him, 2 more, and between them, and this is the detail that made my blood go cold, a shifter. You learn to tell, after a while at a place like Larkspur, something in the stillness, the way the storm seemed to lean away from him. "A tracker, they'd brought a tracker." "Coyle's people," the lead man said by way of introduction, which told me they were so confident they didn't bother to hide it. "We're sweeping the pass. Fugitive came through here wounded. We followed the blood up the road. Trail ends about a 1/4 mile down where the snow buried it." He looked past me into the station, unhurried. "You see anyone tonight, sweetheart?" I hate that word. I let myself hate it openly on my face because the hatred was real and it covered everything else. "I've seen the inside of my own eyelids and not much else," I said. "Pass has been dead since the plows quit. If somebody came through, they didn't come here, and I'd thank you to let me get back to my night." The tracker stepped forward. He didn't say anything. He just breathed in, long and slow, tasting the air of my doorway and every muscle I had wanted to run. This was the moment. The whole night came down to whether 2 scrubbings and a stove fire could fool a nose built by the same evolution that built the man bleeding behind my medicine cabinet. I will tell you what saved us, because it's the kind of detail you couldn't make up. It was the antiseptic. I run a clinic. The entire building reeks of disinfectant and iodine, and the particular chemical bite of the stuff I use to clean wounds. It is the smell of blood being managed, of injury being treated, baked into every board of the place over 6 years. The tracker could smell blood, of course he could, but blood is what my station is supposed to smell of. He couldn't tell my lie from my profession. He frowned, breathed again, and I watched doubt move through him, and I held my irritated, tired face in place with everything I had. "Well," said the lead man. The tracker shook his head slowly. "Clinics stink," he said. "Can't pull anything clean out of it." "Because it's a clinic," I snapped, and shoved the door wider, gambling everything on boldness. "Here, look, 2 rooms, knock yourselves out. And while you're at it you can explain to me why 3 armed men are standing in my doorway in the middle of a truce, because last I checked Larkspur is neutral ground, and last I checked there are people whose entire job is to care a great deal when somebody forgets that." It was the word truce that did it. The lead man's eyes flickered just barely, and I understood that whatever Coyle was, he wasn't ready to be the one who broke the peace openly at a neutral station with a witness. They wanted Lucan dead, but they wanted him dead quietly, in the snow, with no body and no name attached. A medic loudly invoking the truce was exactly the kind of complication they'd come up the mountain to avoid. He looked into the 2 rooms. He did not, thank every god there is, look hard enough at the medicine cabinet. He looked at me a moment longer, calculating, and then he made the choice that men like him always make when violence stops being convenient. "Sorry to wake you," he said, without an ounce of sorry in it. "Lock your door tonight." "I always do," I said, which was a lie because until that night I never had. The truck took 20 minutes to turn around on the buried road. I stood at the window and watched the headlights swing away down the pass until the storm swallowed them, and only then did my legs decide they were finished, and I sat down hard on the floor with my back against the door and shook for a while in the dark. When I finally opened the medicine cabinet, Lucan was conscious. He'd heard all of it, the whole exchange, my voice doing its tired and furious dance, the tracker breathing in my doorway. His face, in the dim light of the supply room, had gone somewhere I couldn't follow. "You said truce to Coyle's enforcer," he said quietly. "You stood in a doorway with 3 of his men, and you dared them to break the peace, with me 4 feet behind a board you could put your fist through. It worked, didn't it?" "It shouldn't have." He let his head rest back against the shelving. "You should be dead. By every rule I know about how the world works, you should be dead, and so should I, and instead you're sitting on the floor shaking and I'm alive behind a cabinet. I don't—" He stopped. The frayed edge came back into his voice. "I don't understand you." "That's all right," I said. "I've been confusing people my whole life." I helped him back to the cot. He could move a little now. The silver was out, and his body was doing the thing shifter bodies do, pulling itself back together at a speed that frightened me even as I'd spent my career wishing my human patients could do the same. But healing that fast burns fuel. He needed to eat, and he needed more than anything to rest, and that, I was about to learn, was the one thing in the world he would not do. I made him eat. I had stew, the kind you keep frozen for the nights when the road closes and you're stuck up the mountain alone. He ate 3 bowls with the focused, unembarrassed hunger of someone whose body has demanded it, and between the second and the third he started, slowly, to talk. I didn't ask him to. I want to be clear about that. I have learned that the fastest way to close a person up is to come at them with questions, so I did what I always do. I talked about nothing, the storm, the generator, the lark pin, and I left long, quiet spaces in it. And into one of those spaces, unprompted, He set down the first piece of the truth. "They call me the most dangerous alpha in the world," he said. "Do you know why?" "Because you win," I said. "That's what the stories say. You've never lost." "That's the story." He turned the empty bowl in his hands. "The real reason is simpler and worse. I'm dangerous because I never let my guard down, not once, not in 40 years. He looked at me. "Do you know what it does to a person to never sleep without one part of you awake and counting exits? To sit at every table with your back to a wall? To never, not at a fire, not in a bed, not in the arms of anyone, fully close your eyes?" "No," I said honestly. "I sleep like the dead. It's a flaw." The place where his smile would have been came and went. "It started after Morn Hollow," he said. "You're too young, maybe, or it didn't reach this far south. We were 30 families. We had a winter den, a deep one, the kind of place you build over generations because it's safe, because it's the safe place, the one everyone can finally exhale in." He stopped. The storm filled the silence. My second, a man I'd known since we were pups, a man I'd have given my throat to gladly, he sold the location. To the humans, the first time. To a rival pack, the second. Both times for the same reason, which was that he thought I'd grown too strong, and that the only way to be safe from me was to make sure I had nothing left to lose. "What happened? What do you think happened?" His voice didn't rise. That was the terrible part. It stayed flat and low and even, and that was so much worse than rage. "We lost the den. We lost the families that were sleeping in it because they trusted that it was safe. 11 of them, 3 were children." He set the bowl down. "I caught him eventually. Everyone assumes I killed him slowly, made an example, the most dangerous alpha in the world. I didn't. I just looked at him. And I understood that he'd been right in his way. The moment I let my guard down, the moment I trusted the wrong thing, 11 people died. So I made a decision. I would never let my guard down again. Not for anyone. Not for 1 second. Because the second I do, someone I'm responsible for pays for it." I sat with that. I am not a person who fills silences with comfort. I've watched too many people offered too much cheap comfort to ever do it. So I just sat and let it be as heavy as it was. "That's why Coyle wants you dead," I said finally. "Not because you're strong, because you're the last alpha who won't make the kind of deal that got your hollow sold." He looked at me sharply, and I understood I'd gotten close to something. "Coyle wants what my second wanted," he said. "He wants the packs broken into pieces small enough to be managed. Pieces that can be bought, or frightened, or starved out one at a time. I'm what's in the way. As long as the Morn packs hold together under one alpha who can't be bought, the truce holds, and Coyle can't carve up the high country the way he's been promising the people who fund him he will." He flexed his healing hand, watched the skin pull itself closed. "So he salted me and chased me into a storm. And the only reason I'm not a frozen body on your pass is that some night medic with a bird on her collar refused to let me die politely. We didn't sleep that first long night. He couldn't, and I wouldn't leave him to sit awake alone, which is a thing about me I've never fully understood. We talked. In the strange, weightless way people talk when the rules of the ordinary world have been suspended by snow and blood, and the particular intimacy of having had your hands inside someone. He asked about the pin. I told him about my sister, who'd left for the coast 2 winters ago and sent letters that came farther and farther apart, and how the lark had been her way of saying I'll fly back, and how I'd stopped believing she would and kept wearing it anyway because hope is a habit you keep up long after you've lost the feeling that goes with it. He understood that. He understood it completely, and I realized that he, of all the people in the world, knew exactly what it was to keep doing a thing long after the feeling had drained out of it. The storm broke near dawn. The wind died and the snow stopped, and the silence that came after was the deep, ringing silence of a buried world. He was stronger by then, strong enough to stand, to walk to the window, to look out at the white expanse, and the road that was now utterly impassable. A single unbroken sheet of snow with no sign that any truck had ever crawled up it. "They'll come back," he said, watching the dawn. "When the road clears, Coyle doesn't quit. He knows the trail ended near here, The tracker doubted, but Coyle won't take doubt for an answer twice. They'll come back with more of them, and next time the antiseptic won't be enough, and next time the truce won't slow them down, because by then they'll have decided the prize is worth the cost. He turned from the window. I have maybe 2 days, 3 if the weather holds the road. I need to be gone before then, and I need to get word to my packs, because if I disappear without a trace, Coyle wins by default. They'll fracture looking for me, and he'll pick them off. Your radio's dead, I assume, I said. And mine only reaches the truce committee, who I just lied to, and who would not exactly be thrilled to relay a message for the fugitive I swore wasn't here. There's a relay station, he said. Old pack signal post up above the tree line, 6 miles, higher than the pass. If I can reach it, I can get word out on a channel Coyle can't hear. He looked at the snow, the unbroken white sheet of it, 6 miles of it climbing. 2 days ago I could have run it in an hour. Now he flexed his hand again, and I saw the truth he wasn't saying. The silver was out, but he was a long way from himself. 6 miles uphill through fresh, deep snow, at altitude, with a body that had nearly died. It might as well have been 600. And here is where the night turned, and where the real choice I've been circling toward finally came into the room and sat down between us. I'll take you, I said. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind, which was fair. You'll do no such thing. I have snowshoes, I said. I have a sled for hauling supplies up from the cache. I know this country better than you do. I've worked this pass for 6 years. I know every drift and every hollow, and where the snow lies thin over the rocks that'll break your leg. You can't make 6 miles uphill alone in the shape you're in. With me, with the sled, with someone who knows the ground, maybe. Maybe we make it. If Coyle's people find us out there in the open, he said slowly, there will be no doorway and no truce to hide behind. There will be no clinic stink to confuse the tracker. There will be 2 sets of tracks in fresh snow leading straight to a pack relay, and one of them will be human, and they will know exactly what you are and exactly what you did, and they will not leave a witness. He stepped close, and for the first time the legend was in his face on purpose, turned toward me to frighten me into sense. You understand what you're offering. You'd be choosing this. Not a stranger at your door you couldn't turn away. This. Walking out into open country with the most hunted creature alive, knowing what's hunting him. I understand, I said. Then say no, he said, and it came out almost like a plea, this man who had never once in 40 years asked anyone for anything. I've cost 11 people their lives by letting them stand close to me. Don't make it 12. Stay here. Lock your door. Forget I knocked. You've already done more than anyone alive has done for me. You don't owe me the rest of it. Say no. I touched the lark pin 400 times a day. I touched it then. My sister sent me a bird, I said, because she wanted me to believe she'd come back. And every day I wear it and I don't believe it, and I wear it anyway, because the alternative is to admit that hope is gone, and I won't. You've spent 40 years not letting yourself trust one single person because the one time you did, it cost you everything. And I think you came up this mountain and knocked on my door politely, twice, because some part of you under all of that is still trying to believe that there's a single person in the world who'd open it. I met his eyes. I'm the person who opened it. Don't ask me to close it now. He didn't answer for a long time. Outside, the dawn came up cold and clear and merciless over 6 miles of fresh, deadly snow. We leave at dark, he said finally. Tracks are harder to follow at night. And Wren, he stopped. Whatever he'd meant to say, he set it down half-finished, and I would not learn the rest of it until the worst moment of what came next. Get some sleep, I told him. Both of us should while we can. He looked at me, and the old refusal moved across his face. I never sleep, I can't, the second I do someone pays. I saw 40 years of it. I saw the den and the 11 and the 3 who were children. I'll keep watch, I said quietly. I won't close my eyes. I'll sit right here and I'll watch the road, and if anything moves on that pass, I'll wake you. You don't have to count the exits. I'll count them for you, just this once, just for a few hours. He sat down on the edge of the cot. He looked at the road, and then he looked at me sitting between him and the door, and I watched something in him that had been locked for 40 years put one hand, tentatively, against the inside of its own cage. He didn't sleep. Not that morning. He wasn't ready. You don't undo 40 years in a night. But he lay back and he let his eyes half close and he let me watch the road, and that, I understood even then, was further than he had let anyone come in longer than I'd been alive. I watched the road until noon. Nothing moved on it but the wind lifting the new snow in long white ribbons. And the whole time in the back of my mind, a small cold voice I couldn't silence kept doing the arithmetic he'd done for me. 6 miles. Open country. A tracker who doubted once and wouldn't doubt twice. 2 sets of tracks, one of them human. I had said yes. I had chosen it. And somewhere down the pass I knew Coyle was waiting for the road to clear. I want you to understand what that looked like, because the stories never get the small things right, and the small things are all that matter. It wasn't dramatic. It was 2 people in too many layers, hauling a supply sled across a frozen yard, our breath freezing into our scarves, the snow squeaking under the shoes in that high cold way it only does below zero. He carried what he could, which wasn't much. I'd loaded the sled and I pulled the rope, and he walked behind me where his weaker steps wouldn't break a fresh trail for me to fall into. We didn't speak. Sound carries forever over snow at night. We had agreed on hand signals like a couple of poachers, and the absurdity of it, a night medic who counted gauze for fun, sneaking across a mountain with the most dangerous alpha in the world, would have made me laugh if I'd had the breath to spare. The first 3 miles were the easy ones, and they nearly killed me anyway. Altitude does something to you that no amount of being fit prepares you for. The air thins and your body keeps reaching for breaths that aren't there. The cold gets into the meat of you. The sled, which had felt manageable in the yard, became a living thing that fought me on every rise, and the rope cut through 3 layers of glove into my palms until I could feel the blood gluing the wool to the wound. I didn't tell him. He had enough to carry. But somewhere in the 4th mile I stumbled and went down to one knee in the snow and couldn't, for a moment, make myself get up. His hand closed around my arm and lifted me. Gently. The same hand I'd watched bend a steel cot rail like wax. He took the sled rope out of my torn glove and looked at my palm, and his jaw went tight, and he didn't say anything because we couldn't, but he pulled the sled the rest of the way, on a body that 2 days ago had been dying, because he would rather spend the last of himself than let me bleed for him 1 more yard. We reached the tree line near midnight. Above it the world changed, no shelter, no shadow. Just the bald white shoulder of the mountain rising toward the relay post under a sky so thick with stars it looked like something spilled. The post was a black square against the snow, half a mile up the slope, and it was completely, brutally exposed. Anyone watching the mountain would see 2 figures crossing that open white in starlight as plainly as ink on a page. He stopped me at the tree line with a hand on my shoulder. He pointed down the slope, off to the east, where the pass came up from the valley, and I saw them. Headlights, 3 sets, maybe 4, crawling up the cleared lower road. The plows had been out. The road was open. Coyle hadn't waited for dawn after all. We had run out of time, and we had run out of cover, and between us and the relay post was half a mile of open snow under a sky bright enough to read by. He pulled me down behind the last of the trees and put his mouth close to my ear, and for the first time in hours, in a voice barely above breath, he spoke. "They'll reach the station inside an hour. When they find it empty, they'll cut for sign. The tracker will find these tracks." He looked at the open slope, at the post, at the headlights. "One of us makes the post, sends the signal. The other—" He stopped. "No," I said. "The other draws them east, toward the old game trails where the tracks split and tangle. Buys the first 1 time. It only takes one of us at the post, Ren. The signal goes out, my packs hold, Coyle loses, and it doesn't matter what happens to the one who—" I said no, my voice cracked on it. "We go together, we both make the post, we both." "We won't both make it." He said it the way he said everything true and terrible, flat and quiet. "You're spent. I can see it. You've got maybe that half-mile left in you and not an inch more, and that's if nothing's chasing you. If we go together and slow, they catch us both in the open and it's over. The signal never goes out and we die for nothing. If we split, one of us reaches the post and the signal goes out no matter what happens to the other." He took my torn hand very carefully in both of his. "Let me be the one who draws them off. I'm what they want. They'll follow me and ignore the post until it's too late. You're fast on these shoes, you know the ground, you send the signal and you live. That's the choice. That's the only choice that ends with the signal out and you alive." And there it was, the heavy thing, the one I'd felt coming since the first knock on the door. Because he was right. Tactically, coldly, he was right, and I knew it, and the medic in me who'd spent 6 years doing triage, choosing, always choosing, who gets the time and who doesn't, that part of me did the arithmetic and came up with his answer. One of us reaches the post. The other dies drawing the hunters off. And the one who dies should be the one who can fight, who can run hurt, who they chase past everything else, him. It was the right call, and I would rather have died than make it. "Give me the signal sequence," I said. My voice had gone strange, far away. "Tell me what to send." Something broke open in his face, relief, I think, that I'd accepted it, that I'd be the one to live. He told me the sequence 3 times, made me repeat it, made me say it back until it was carved into me. A frequency. A code. 6 words that would tell the Morn packs their alpha lived and held, and that they should hold with him. "When you've sent it," he said, "you don't come back this way. You go down the north face, the long way, the way they won't expect. You don't look for me. You don't wait. Promise me." "I promise," I said, and it was the second lie I'd told that whole long ordeal, and the only one I've ever been glad of. He looked at me for one more moment. The headlights crawled closer up the pass below, and the most dangerous alpha in the world, who had not let his guard down for 40 years, who had told me that trust was the thing that got 11 people killed, leaned his forehead against mine in the dark and the cold just for a second and said, "Thank you for opening the door." Then he was gone, a dark shape breaking from the trees, running east, deliberately loud now, deliberately visible, throwing himself across the open snow in a great arc designed to be seen. And below, the headlights stopped and turned and began to track him. I ran for the post. I don't remember most of that half-mile. I remember it was uphill and I had nothing left, and I did it anyway, on torn hands and dead legs and the 6 words burning in my chest. I remember falling twice. I remember the post resolving out of the dark into an actual structure, a steel cabinet inside a collapsing hut, frost-furred dials and a hand crank and a microphone older than I was. I remember my fingers, too cold to feel, finding the frequency, cranking the generator until my arm screamed, keying the mic. I sent the 6 words. I sent them 4 times until a voice came back through the static, young, urgent, disbelieving, then fierce. And I knew it had landed, I knew it had gone out. I knew that whatever happened now, the Morn packs knew their alpha lived. And then I broke the second promise, and I went back for him. I found them by the sound. Down the eastern slope, near the old game trails where the tracks tangled just as he'd planned, except the plan had been for him to lose them in the tangle, and instead they'd cornered him against a rock face, 4 of them, the tracker and 3 guns, and he was down on one knee in the bloodied snow because his body had finally spent the very last of what 2 days of healing had given it. He'd led them all the way here. He'd given me my half-mile and my signal and the long open run, and it had cost him everything. And now he knelt in the snow with 4 of Coyle's people around him and no fight left in his ruined body. And the lead man, the one who'd called me sweetheart, raised a pistol I knew without being told was loaded with silver. I didn't think. That's the honest truth, and it's the only defense I have. I didn't make a noble choice. I came down that slope screaming the one thing I had: truce, neutral ground, I'm Larkspur Station, and the committee KNOWS, I'm here. Which was a lie. The committee knew nothing. But it was the lie that had worked once, and it was all I had, and I threw it at them as hard as I could throw anything. It bought a half-second of hesitation. Just a half-second, the lead man's head turning toward this shrieking medic flailing down the slope, the calculation flickering across his flat eyes, witness, truce, complication. And a half-second was all he needed. I will not describe what Lucan did in that half-second, because some of it I didn't see, and some of it I will not put into words. I will only tell you that whatever the stories say about the most dangerous alpha in the world, they undersell it, and that he had been holding back his entire dying body for one last thing, and that the one thing was this. When it was over, 3 of Coyle's people were down and the 4th, the tracker had run, was still running, a black shape fleeing east across the snow, carrying back to Coyle the one piece of news that would change everything. That the vein was alive, that the signal had gone out, that the packs had heard, and that the prize was no longer quiet or cheap or worth the cost. And Lucan was on his knees again in the red snow, swaying, finished, and I reached him just as he started to fall and I caught him, and we went down together, the 2 of us, into the snow at the bottom of the eastern slope under all those spilled stars. "You came back," he said. His voice was almost nothing now. "You promised." "I lied," I said. "I was crying. I hadn't noticed when it started. I'm a terrible liar. I've been lying all night. It turns out I'm very good at it. I lied to Coyle, and I lied to the committee, and I lied to you. I came back. I'm here." He laughed. It was barely a breath. It cost him to do it. But it was a laugh, the first real one. The smile that had been a ghost on his face for 2 days finally arriving in full. And on the face of a legend, it looked like something cracking open after a very long winter. "The signal," he said. "It's out 4 times. A voice came back, young, angry, glad they heard you. They know you're alive, they're holding." He closed his eyes, and I felt the whole monstrous weight of him settle against me, all that strength gone soft, 40 years of counting exits and watching doors and never letting go, all of it draining out of him at once into the snow and into my arms. For one horrible moment I thought he'd died. Then I felt him breathe, slow, deep, the deep even breath of a body that has finally, completely let go, and his head turned and found the curve where my shoulder met my neck and settled there, heavy and warm, and stayed. He'd fallen asleep. The most dangerous alpha in the world. The man who had not closed his eyes in front of another living soul in 40 years, who had buried 11 people because he trusted once, who had told me with absolute conviction that the second he let his guard down someone he loved would pay for it, had fallen asleep on my shoulder, in the open, in the snow. With 3 bodies cooling 10 feet away, and a tracker running for reinforcements, and every reason in the world to keep one part of himself awake and counting. And he had chosen instead to sleep. On me, because for the first time in 40 years there was someone he believed would keep the watch. I have thought about that moment every single day since. I think I'll think about it until I die. People hear this story and they want it to be about the romance, or the rescue, or the legend, and it isn't, not really. It's about the smallest, most enormous thing a person can do, which is to look at the thing that destroyed them and decide to risk it one more time. He didn't fall asleep because he was beaten. His body was finished, yes, but I've patched up enough exhausted people to know the difference between collapse and surrender, and this was not collapse. This was surrender, the good kind, the rarest kind, the kind that takes more courage than any battle. He had decided with the very last clear thought in his head that he was safe. With me, a night medic with a bird on her collar on a mountain in the snow. So I held him. I held the most dangerous creature alive while he slept, and I watched the dark slope for the tracker who might come back, and I counted the exits for him the way I'd promised I would, and I did not move, not for hours, not even when my legs went numb and the cold crept up through me and my torn hands stopped hurting because they'd stopped feeling anything at all. His packs found us near dawn. They came up the north face, the way I'd been told to flee, the way Coyle wouldn't expect, a column of them dark against the snow, led by a young woman with his same gray eyes, whose voice I recognized as the one that had answered the signal. They moved fast and silent, and when they reached us they stopped, all of them at the sight of it. Their alpha, the Vane, the most dangerous alpha in the world, asleep in the arms of a human medic in the bloody snow, with 3 of Coyle's people dead around them and his head on her shoulder like a child's. The young woman knelt. She looked at him sleeping. She looked at me, at the truce pin and the lark pin side by side on my frozen collar, at my ruined hands still holding him up. And whatever she'd come up that mountain expecting, it wasn't this, and I watched her try to fit it into a world that had never once let her see her alpha unguarded. "He's asleep," she said, barely a whisper, like it was the impossible part, not the dead enemies, not the silver, that he's asleep. "I know," I said. "Don't wake him, he hasn't in a very long time." She didn't wake him. None of them did. They built a litter and they lifted him onto it so gently, so carefully, that he never stirred, and only when they had him secure did the young woman do the thing I'll carry with me alongside the weight of his head on my shoulder. She took off her own glove and she reached out, and she folded my torn, frozen hand into her warm one, and she said, "Morn remembers its debts. For as long as there's a single vein breathing, you have a pack." She looked back at him on the litter. "Both of us do now." They wanted to take me down with them. I wouldn't go. Larkspur Station was mine, and the truce was mine, and there'd be questions about 3 dead men on the eastern slope that a vanishing medic couldn't answer and a present one might. So I went back down the way I'd come, alone in the gray dawn, and I let myself into my cold station, and I lit the stove and I sat down at my desk, and I opened my logbook to the empty line I'd closed 2 nights before. I still didn't write it down, some things you carry. But under the empty line, after a while, I wrote 4 words, because I'm a medic and a medic keeps records, and because I needed, just once, to have said it somewhere outside of myself. "He slept, he's safe." That was 8 months ago. The road's clear now, it's nearly summer. Coyle is well. The story of what happened to Coyle once the packs knew their alpha lived and held is a different story, and not a quiet one and not mine to tell. The truce is stronger than it's been in years. Turns out there's nothing like a failed murder to make people remember why the rules exist. I still work nights at Larkspur. I still count the gauze on Sundays. I still touch the lark pin 400 times a day. My sister wrote last month. She's coming back in the fall. I find I believe it now. I don't entirely know why. And sometimes, when the road's been quiet a long while and the night is clear, I'll hear something on the pass, not a truck, not the wind, something softer, something on 4 feet that moves the way the storm used to bend around his shoulders, and I'll go to the door, and I'll open it before the knock comes. He never stays long. He can't. A pack needs its alpha, and an alpha can't be seen too often at a human medic's door. But he comes. The most dangerous creature alive crosses a mountain in the dark, sometimes, just to sit by my stove for an hour and let himself, for that hour, not count the exits. The last time he fell asleep again, sitting up in the chair by the fire, mid-sentence almost, the way only someone who finally trusts the room will do. I didn't wake him. I sat down beside him and I put my logbook on my knee and I kept the watch.